She stood in the back of the courtroom, her stomach heavy with child tears streaming down her cheeks. Across the aisle, the mistress flicked her glossy hair and let out a loud, mocking laugh. To everyone watching, it seemed like a cruel game, a pregnant wife's heartbreak pitched against an opportunistic lover's triumph. But just when the gallery believed they had witnessed the final humiliation, the millionaire, the very man at the center of it all, rose to his feet. His voice, steeled by a secret he had kept buried, changed everything in an instant. No one in that room could have predicted what he was about to reveal. Alicia Carter walked across the sunlit marble of the Carter Estate foyer with the poised grace of someone who was used to living among beautiful things. At 28, she had grown accustomed to every convenience money could buy, thanks to her husband, Mark Carter, the multimillionaire CEO of the high-profile real estate development firm, Carter Innovations. Yet behind her regal bearing lurked a quiet anxiety. She was almost 7 months pregnant, and her doctor had repeatedly told her to avoid stress. But Alicia knew the storm brewing beneath the polished surface of her marriage would threaten that advice every day. Alicia's family name was Lafleur before she took on Carter. The Lafleurs had been old-money aristocrats back in Paris, prominent for their centuries-old perfume empire, Maison Lafleur. Although Alicia was born in the States, her parents had always endowed her with a European sensibility, an appreciation for detailed tradition and elegance. That graceful upbringing radiated from her every gesture, whether setting a dinner table for a charity event or exchanging pleasantries with the public figures who circled their social orbit. But Alicia's marriage to Mark was not a simple union of wealth and power. They fell in love when Alicia was an interior design intern at Carter Innovations, hired to sprinkle high-end style over Mark's new downtown penthouse project in Chicago. Their relationship began quietly, fueled by a mutual fascination with each other's sense of beauty, she in the design, he in the architecture. Late nights, spent poring over sketches, turned into quiet dinners. Before either of them understood the depth of their feelings, Mark had whisked Alicia to a moonlit terrace in Paris and proposed with a ring that once belonged to his grandmother, Harriet Carter. For the first few years, they were the envy of the city. Alicia became a rising star in the interior design world, showcasing Carter Innovations' high-end developments in glossy magazines. Mark's business empire soared, and soon the Carter brand touched skyscrapers across the US and Europe. They were unstoppable, a golden couple blessed with looks, wealth, talent, and seemingly true love. But success can bring shadowy temptations. Mark's CEO duties demanded countless late-night meetings and global travel, peppering him with an endless parade of potential admirers. It was at a business conference in New York that he crossed paths with Veronica Rutherford, a PR executive rumored to specialize in forging close relationships with powerful men to boost her own career. Though Mark mentioned her name only in passing at first, Alicia's sharp instincts picked up the discomfort in his voice. She had learned to read Mark's subtlest cues, and there was something about the mention of Veronica Rutherford that set Alicia on edge. She tried to ignore the nagging sensation in the pit of her stomach. After all, Alicia was pregnant with their first child, a joyous milestone they both claimed to have eagerly awaited. She didn't want suspicion or fear to overshadow the miracle growing inside her. At first, Alicia chose to trust Mark, focusing on her own well-being and forging ahead with designing a new wing for the Carter estate that would become their child's nursery. It was a bright, airy room of pastel blues and soft creams, filled with plush furniture and whimsical animal prints. On most days, Alicia found solace inside that nearly finished nursery, imagining the laughter of their future son or daughter. However, rumors started bubbling in hush-hush whispers among staff and acquaintances. Casual remarks from Mark's business partners, winks from some of the more jaded socialites at dinner galas. Alicia heard murmurs that Veronica Rutherford had been spotted emerging from Mark's limousine at odd hours, that she was seen seated next to him at a private members-only bar in Manhattan. More than once, Alicia caught Mark hurriedly ending calls or shutting down text messages he refused to explain. When Alicia finally confronted him, Mark brushed off her suspicions as crazy tabloid garbage. He insisted Veronica Rutherford was merely handling the company's PR strategies. To quiet his wife's apprehension, Mark reminded her that he loved her, that she was carrying his child, and that once the baby arrived, they would whisk themselves away to their private estate in Napa Valley for some well-deserved downtime. "Trust me," he would say, "this is business. Nothing more." Alicia wanted to trust him. She needed to. The stress weighed on her, and her doctor kept emphasizing that worry could affect the baby's development. The last thing Alicia wanted was to risk her child's well-being. Yet the fleeting glances and half-truths continued. She felt the chasm widening between them. The hush grew louder. The intangible tension festered. It was in the hush of that tension, like a gathering storm, that Alicia first sensed her world was about to unravel. Though she was uncertain of the exact nature of Mark's involvement with Veronica, Alicia knew enough about heartbreak to sense that the laughter she once shared with her husband was no longer the same. Instead of warm comfort, their silence bristled with secrets and lies. And Alicia feared the day that truth would rise to the surface, as unstoppable as the tide. One Thursday afternoon, when the Chicago sky was the color of slate, Alicia decided to take matters into her own hands. Her heart pounded as she stepped into the grand library of the Carter estate, where Mark's personal study was located. She carried a slim leather folder, one that contained everything she had gleaned from discreet inquiries made to a private investigator recommended by an old friend, Lucy Fielding, a respected divorce attorney in New York. Lucy was famously known for handling high-profile celebrity splits, but she also had a quiet side business, helping the wives of wealthy men gather proof of infidelity. That was exactly the kind of advice Alicia needed. The shadows in the study felt heavier than usual. She lowered herself into Mark's leather office chair, wincing as her center of gravity shifted with her growing belly. She opened the folder and leafed through the photographs and phone records the investigator, a man named Carl Goodman, had provided. The images were painfully clear. Mark and Veronica entering an upscale hotel together in Manhattan at 11:45 p.m. Another Mark's arm around her waist as they crossed a quiet street toward a taxi. The records were more damning consistent text messages at odd hours. 1 a.m., 3 a.m., and short calls made right after Mark had assured Alicia he was going to bed on business trips. There were also reservations for dinners Alicia never knew about, and cocktails at exclusive rooftop bars. Every piece of evidence sliced into Alicia's heart like a razor. Alicia pressed a hand protectively over her abdomen, where their baby was gently kicking. She wondered if she had the emotional strength to confront Mark with all of this, or if she should wait until the baby was born. But Lucy's last email had been explicit if Alicia wanted to protect herself and her child. She needed to gather every shred of evidence before any confrontation. Depending on how Mark reacted, Alicia might need to keep some details hidden for the sake of legal strategy. Yet Alicia felt torn. Despite his betrayal, she still loved Mark, or perhaps she clung to the memory of the man he used to be. She remembered him crouching at her feet the day she told him she was pregnant, burying his face in her lap. tears of joy in his eyes. She remembered his gentle touch at night, his excitement when her belly first began to show. Was that genuine? Or was it overshadowed by the presence of another woman in his life? Taking a shaky breath, Alicia closed the folder. She decided not to confront Mark just yet. Instead, she locked away the documents in a hidden compartment behind a row of antique books. The next step, Lucy said, was to discreetly attend Mark's upcoming conference in New York. Lucy would arrange for Alicia to stay in a nearby hotel under a friend's name. Alicia could see with her own eyes if Mark and Veronica were carrying on behind her back. A final confirmation, no more guesswork, no more second-guessing. The chance came sooner than expected. Mark announced at dinner that he had to fly to New York for a weekend business retreat with corporate sponsors. Alicia nodded, feigning indifference. She noted the slight hesitation in his eyes, as if he sensed she knew more than she was letting on. But Alicia had grown adept at disguising her hurt. She carefully concealed the tremor in her hands. The day of Mark's departure, Alicia pretended to have a prenatal spa appointment in the morning, but instead slipped out of the estate in a chauffeured car that Lucy Fielding had arranged for her. She flew to New York under the name Mrs. Moreau, an alias Lucy suggested. Once she arrived, Alicia checked into a modest but discreet boutique hotel, several blocks from the Midtown Hilton where Mark would be staying. To her surprise, upon arrival, Alicia found an envelope waiting at the front desk. Inside was a note from a Carl Goodman, the private investigator. He's here. She's here. Keep calm. Be ready. Beneath the neatly typed words was an address and time. A high-end restaurant in Soho. 9 p.m. Feeling her pulse hammering in her throat, Alicia looked at the clock. It was already 7:30 p.m. She was exhausted from the flight, her back ached, and the baby felt especially active. But she had to push forward. If Mark was truly with Veronica, Alicia needed that final indisputable proof. She needed to see it with her own eyes, no matter how much it hurt. Alicia changed into a loose-fitting black dress, one that concealed her pregnancy bump beneath an elegant coat. She took a taxi and arrived just before 9 p.m. Carl met her in a dimly lit corner near the bar. The restaurant was a celebrity haunt known for its paparazzi-proof private dining room. As Alicia stood there, scanning the crowd, she suddenly saw them, Mark and Veronica. They were at a table near the back, leaning in close. Veronica wore a tight crimson cocktail dress that clung to her every curve, her lips parted in a mocking smile. Mark looked animated, talking and laughing in a way Alicia couldn't recall him doing for months. It stung her to the core. Carl discreetly positioned himself to take photos, but Alicia hardly noticed. She was transfixed. Her husband's hand slipped beneath the table, presumably resting on Veronica's thigh. Alicia felt a physical wave of nausea roll through her. She pressed a hand to her abdomen, forcing herself not to faint. She had feared this moment, but the reality was more agonizing than any nightmare she had conjured. Suddenly, Veronica tossed her head back in laughter. A laugh so carefree it drove home a brutal truth. The mistress was relaxed. She felt secure. She believed she had won. Alicia's tears blurred her vision, and as she stared, she realized that in that moment, Veronica was everything. Alicia was not a woman unburdened by pregnancy, glowing with the seductive confidence of someone who had nothing to lose. In that flicker of time, Alicia's world shattered. She turned away and fled, not wanting to watch another second. She hadn't expected to confront them tonight. Not alone, not like this. The swirl of heartbreak and fury crushed her. But somewhere beneath the pain, a seed of determination took root. Alicia realized that if she wanted to fight for her dignity and for her child, she needed a plan stronger than her tears. Alicia returned to Chicago the next day under a haze of fatigue and betrayal. Every mile that brought her closer to the Carter estate felt like an anvil pressing against her chest. She wanted to hide from the world, to curl up and cry. But Lucy Fielding's voice rang in her ears. Protect yourself. Emotions can wait until you're safe. Unfortunately for Alicia, the scandal had already begun to leak. A photograph of Mark and Veronica whispering intimately at the Soho restaurant made its way into a gossip column, one penned by an up-and-coming journalist named Melissa Crane. While the media piece didn't name Veronica outright, it referred to her as a mystery woman spotted with Mark Carter. The article took a sensational tone describing the pregnant Alicia and hinting at a salacious affair that threatened the Carter marriage. By the time Alicia opened her eyes, the morning after her return, her phone was clogged with missed calls and texts from concerned friends, prying acquaintances, and even reporters looking for a statement. She realized that while she was away, the story had exploded across the tabloids. Carter Innovations' PR team was already in damage control mode, and ironically, Veronica Rutherford, being a PR executive, was likely orchestrating the official spin to protect Mark's image. The audacity left Alicia speechless. Late that afternoon, Alicia heard Mark enter the house, the echo of his footsteps on the marble floor. She braced herself, clutching the staircase railing for support. She could hear him calling her name, the tension in his voice betraying an urgent panic. When she finally turned to face him in the foyer, her eyes were steeled with a resolve she hadn't felt before. "Alicia, it's not what it looks like." Mark began, breathless from traveling straight from the airport. "The media is twisting things." She stared at him, taking in his rumpled suit, the dark circles under his eyes. "Then what is it?" "Because it looks like you've been having an affair while I carry your child." He paused, searching for the right words to feed her. Perhaps he had prepared a script on the flight, but confronted with her open hurt, he fumbled. "Veronica is just a close business contact. She's trying to help me secure some deals." Alicia cut him off, her voice quivering. "I was there, Mark. In New York. I saw you with my own eyes. Don't you dare stand there and gaslight me." His face paled. That single revelation was enough to strip away any pretense. He began, but fell silent. Guilt etched in every line of his features. It felt like an eternity passed in the quiet that followed. Alicia's tears came in silent streams. She brushed them away angrily. A part of her wanted to scream, to hit him, to crumble. But she resisted. Strength was her only defense now. Finally, Mark uttered, "I made a mistake, Alicia. I'm sorry." The words hung in the air, too small, too shallow to mend the devastation they both knew existed. How long, she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Just a few months," he admitted. Alicia's lip trembled. Months. So while she was celebrating every milestone of the pregnancy he was carrying on an affair, you looked me in the eyes and told me everything was fine. She managed her tone raw with betrayal. He reached for her hand, but she recoiled. "We'll figure this out," he insisted. "We have a child on the way. I'll end things with Veronica. I promise." Alicia held his gaze for a moment, searching for any trace of sincerity. Then she whispered, "You already broke us, Mark. I don't even know if I want to fix it." That night, Alicia retreated to a private guest suite, locking the door behind her. Sleep was nearly impossible. She felt her baby shift, and tears slid down her cheeks as she whispered words of comfort to the unborn life within her. With every passing hour, Alicia grew more certain that her next move would be shaped by her own strength rather than false assurances. In the days that followed, the tabloids blazed with speculation. Some articles painted Alicia as a pitiful victim, others labeled Mark a cunning philanderer. A few even tried to frame the Mistress as a power PR executive whose charms Mark found irresistible. But it was the first time Alicia fully understood how public her private pain had become. Friends and foes alike whispered at social gatherings, and Alicia couldn't even go to her favorite cafe without feeling eyes on her. She withdrew, refusing all calls from the press. Instead, she spent her time quietly preparing for her child's arrival, determined to provide a stable, loving environment, regardless of Mark's scandal. She reached out to Lucy for legal advice about preemptive custody measures, including child support should it come to that. Lucy advised her to remain calm and strategic, reminding her that the law favors the mother, especially one dealing with infidelity. Meanwhile, Mark tried to salvage what was left of his public image. He granted a carefully orchestrated interview on a prime-time news show, claiming rumors of his affair were overblown. He insisted that he and Alicia were solid, and that their unborn child was his greatest priority. Watching him lie so effortlessly on national television shattered any lingering doubt Alicia had. The man she once loved was either lost or so controlled by his own ambition that he couldn't even speak truthfully about the affair, yet unknown to both Alicia and Mark. Veronica Rutherford had her own game plan. While Mark scrambled for damage control, Veronica reveled in the newfound attention. She was seen out at high society events, smirking at the paparazzi and dropping cryptic hints about her relationship with Mark. It was as though she thrived off the drama and off Alicia's pain. And Alicia. She found herself trapped in a cycle of tears, anger, and maternal protectiveness. She couldn't bear the sight of the lavish estate that felt more like a museum of broken promises. She felt suffocated by the halls that echoed with her heartbreak. So she set her sights on returning to her late grandmother's countryside home outside the city, a place where she could escape, think, and breathe. All she wanted was to shield her unborn child from the toxic environment Mark and Veronica were creating, and to find a moment of peace in the swirling storm. She hadn't known then that the storm was only beginning. Veronica Rutherford had spent most of her adult life perfecting a particular set of skills. She was raised in a modest home in Kansas, but from her early teenage years, she dreamt of escaping to a life of luxury. Her cunning intelligence and flawless social graces helped her secure scholarships, gain entry into elite universities, and later land high-profile PR jobs in New York. She sharpened her instincts by observing how powerful men operated, how they hid their vices, how they flaunted their virtues, and how they could be manipulated by a well-timed compliment or a suggestive smile. When Veronica met Mark at a corporate event, she sensed a high-value target. Mark was charming, successful, and had the golden reputation of a devoted husband. To Veronica, that made him an even greater challenge. She believed that if she could seduce a man so seemingly loyal, it would elevate her status and open countless doors. She had never planned on his wife being pregnant, but once she learned that detail, she saw an opportunity. The scandal could play to her advantage if spun correctly. She could become the woman so irresistible that even a father-to-be would risk everything. In Veronica's twisted logic, that was a badge of honor in the cutthroat social circles she moved in. After Mark attempted to distance himself from her, following Alicia's confrontation, Veronica wasted no time adjusting her strategy. She began discreetly approaching media outlets and tabloids, leaking tidbits of information that painted her as the glamorous other woman. She never confessed outright to an affair, but she dropped enough hints to stir intrigue. She implied Mark was torn that their bond was so strong he could hardly bear to let her go. Like an expert conductor, Veronica played the rumor mill to her tune, orchestrating the narrative so that she emerged as a tantalizing enigma rather than a mere home wrecker. One afternoon, as Alicia was packing a small suitcase for her stay at her grandmother's cottage, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Unknown. I hope the baby's okay. V. Alicia nearly dropped the phone. Her heart pounded and her anger soared. How did Veronica get her personal number? And what kind of monstrous cruelty was this? Was she mocking Alicia's pregnancy? Furious, Alicia deleted the text, but her peace was shattered. She realized that Veronica was not just another fling of Mark's that could be swept under the rug. This woman was cunning, relentless, and dangerously brazen. A day later, a second text arrived. I know you hate me, but ask Mark about the Redwood deal if you want the truth. V. The Redwood deal. Alicia recognized the name as one of Carter Innovations' major acquisitions, a luxurious condominium project in San Francisco. Mark had been working on it for months with a rumored budget of hundreds of millions. Why would Veronica want Alicia to ask about Redwood? Was she suggesting that Mark's betrayal extended beyond the affair, that there was some scandal attached to his company as well? Alicia's curiosity warred with her contempt. She considered ignoring it, but the Redwood project was well known in real estate circles as a risky but potentially huge payoff. If there was something shady going on, it could sink not only Mark's company, but also Alicia's financial security, which she needed for her child. With a sigh, she forwarded the text to Lucy Fielding, asking for advice. Lucy's reply was swift. We need to follow every lead. Don't confront Mark yet. I'll dig around. Meanwhile, Mark was fighting his own battles. PR crises, investor anxieties, and the quiet condemnation from friends and family weighed heavily on him. His father, Gregory Carter, a respected philanthropist, expressed his disappointment in private. The old man's words stabbed Mark's pride. You jeopardized our family's honor. And at what cost? Mark realized too late that his personal failings were now a public spectacle, and that Veronica Rutherford was more dangerous than he'd ever anticipated. Torn between the guilt of hurting his pregnant wife and the fear of losing everything, Mark made a series of desperate moves. He called Veronica, begging her to stop feeding the tabloids. She listened, stifling laughter, and made lukewarm promises. But each time Mark tried to extricate himself from her web, Veronica pulled him back with a sly reference to Redwood or a veiled threat that she might reveal company secrets. She had gleaned enough insider knowledge during their affair to hold Mark hostage in his own scandal. Veronica's cunning didn't stop there. She began showing up at high-profile gatherings for philanthropic causes Mark usually attended with Alicia. Only now, Mark arrived alone. Standing across the room, Veronica would flash him a knowing smile, whisper something to a journalist, and watch the fireworks ensue. She reveled in the attention, her mocking laughter echoing in the backgrounds of society columns. Alicia read every gossip piece with a heavy heart, but her maternal instinct flared stronger each time. She would not be humiliated without recourse. She would not allow Veronica's cruelty to define her future or the future of her child. While Alicia packed the final items into her suitcase, maternity clothes, prenatal vitamins, and a baby blanket she had sewn herself, she paused to look around the grand bedroom she had once shared with Mark. She remembered all the nights they spent dreaming of the future, marveling at the miracle of life growing inside her. Now those dreams felt contaminated by Mark's betrayal. Yet she refused to let the shame overshadow the hope she still carried for her baby. Even if the marriage ended, her love for her child would endure. Alicia resolved to find out the secrets behind Redwood. She would discover exactly what Veronica was hinting at, and use that knowledge to secure her and the baby's future. Little did Alicia know, the Redwood deal contained a tangle of corruption that would ultimately lead them all to a tense, explosive confrontation, one that would make the mistress's laughter turn to fear and the pregnant wife's tears transform into a fierce resolve. Alicia arrived at her grandmother's countryside cottage under cover of twilight. The ivy-covered stone walls and neatly tended rose gardens brought a wave of nostalgia. She was grateful to find a refuge, removed from the public eye. No prying paparazzi, no neighbors giving pitying looks, and most importantly, no Mark. Her only companion was a devoted caretaker, Mrs. Garrison, who had looked after Alicia's grandmother for years. The next morning, Alicia woke to the peaceful sound of birdsong. For a moment, she forgot about her marital crisis, focusing instead on the comforting stillness. But reality came crashing back when her phone vibrated a text from Lucy Fielding. "Call me when you can. I've discovered something about Redwood." 30 minutes later, Alicia sat with a steaming cup of tea, her phone held to her ear, listening as Lucy explained the gravity of the situation. According to Lucy's sources, Redwood was marred by allegations of bribery and land use violations. The City Council had been investigating claims that Carter Innovations, in partnership with a mysterious shell corporation, had bribed local officials to overlook environmental regulations. If these allegations were true, it would mean potential criminal charges, massive fines, and irreparable damage to the Carter Empire's reputation. Alicia felt her heart pounding. "Are you certain?" she asked, swallowing the lump in her throat. She had known Mark was ambitious, even a risk-taker, but she never imagined he would stoop to illegal dealings. Lucy's voice was grim. "My source at City Hall says an internal report was filed pointing fingers at Mark's top executives. If Mark knew or was complicit, he could be facing charges. And if Veronica knows this, she might be using it as leverage." Leverage for what Alicia asked, although she suspected the answer. Money, power, security, who knows? Veronica seems like the type who thrives on control. She's probably playing both sides, letting Mark know she can sink him with one phone call all, while basking in the scandal spotlight. Alicia exhaled sharply, her free hand trembling over her belly. "What does this mean for me and my child?" "It means you need to protect yourself legally. If Redwood goes belly up, Mark's finances might be frozen or severely compromised. If you two end up divorcing, you'll be in a battle for assets. Let's get ahead of this." Alicia thanked Lucy and ended the call, her thoughts churning. She looked at the old family portraits lining the walls of the cottage, recalling her grandmother's teachings about dignity and resilience. She realized she couldn't simply hide away here and hope for the best. She needed to confront Mark, but on her own terms and armed with the truth. Summoning courage, Alicia dialed Mark's number. He picked up on the second ring, sounding relieved to hear from her. "Alicia," he breathed, "where are you?" "I've been worried." Ignoring his concern, she went straight to the point. "Mark, I know about Redwood. Tell me the truth." A loaded silence followed. She could almost hear his heartbeat quicken through the phone. "What exactly do you think you know?" He asked, his voice tight. "That there's an investigation into bribery and illegal permits, and that Veronica is holding it over your head," Alicia replied, keeping her tone even despite her nerves. He sighed heavily. "Look, Redwood was my biggest project. I told the team to do whatever it took to get the job done. I might have ignored some red flags about how they got approvals, but I didn't personally bribe anyone, at least not directly. The problem is, if the DA sees me as responsible, I could be charged with conspiracy. So Veronica is blackmailing you with this? Alicia pressed anger simmering beneath her calm. She's threatened to expose it to the press, Mark admitted. She claims she has internal documents that show I authorized those shady dealings. I don't know how she got them, but if she hands them over, it could ruin me. Alicia swallowed her indignation. And what about us, Mark? You told me you wanted to end things with her, yet you let this drag on. He sounded desperate. I'm trying to handle it, Alicia. I never meant for you to be dragged into this. I never meant to hurt you or the baby. But the damage was done. Alicia felt exhaustion weigh her down. She ended the call with a simple, "You'll hear from me soon." She needed time to consider her next move, to weigh the safety of her child against the crumbling empire Mark had built. Over the next few weeks, Alicia stayed in the cottage, working closely with Lucy to map out legal and financial strategies. They combed through documents detailing Alicia's shares in Carter Innovations, her prenuptial agreement with Mark, and every last bit of evidence that might protect her if Redwood blew up. There were days Alicia felt a pang of regret. She had once dreamed of raising a family with Mark, building a legacy together. Now she was preparing for the possibility of testifying against him if the Redwood scandal escalated. The child in her womb rolled and kicked a somber reminder that innocence was at stake. Meanwhile, tabloids gleefully reported every rumor about Mark Carter's meltdown. Veronica played her role perfectly, showing up at high society galas, offering no comment, but wearing a knowing smirk that fueled the media frenzy. Occasionally, Alicia would see a headline like, "The Mistress laughs while the wife weeps," and feel sickened by the cruelty. But she never let it break her determination. Then, just as it seemed Redwood might slide into a quiet settlement, the district attorney's office in San Francisco announced a formal probe. Subpoenas were issued. Mark Carter received an official letter demanding he appear to testify in front of a grand jury. The Redwood fiasco was no longer a rumor, it was an impending legal showdown. Alicia and Lucy watched from the sidelines, uncertain how it would all unfold. Perhaps Mark could negotiate a deal to save himself. Perhaps Redwood would blow over with a hefty fine. But Veronica was the wild card. If she presented her incriminating evidence, Mark's future, and possibly Alicia's, would hang by a thread. In the midst of this chaos, Alicia felt her baby drop lower in her belly. Her doctor's appointments confirmed the child was healthy, but Alicia knew stress was not her friend. In a moment of clarity, she decided to attend Mark's grand jury testimony in San Francisco. She had to see for herself how far this would go, and whether the father of her child could find redemption or be swallowed by his mistakes. Little did she realize that inside that courtroom, an even bigger revelation awaited her, one that would shift the balance of power between wife, mistress, and millionaire, and expose secrets deeper than she had ever imagined. The day Mark was scheduled to testify felt surreal. Alicia woke before dawn in her hotel room in San Francisco, her nerves tangling with the baby's early morning kicks. She slipped on a simple black maternity dress and draped a cashmere shawl over her shoulders, determined to carry herself with poise despite the turmoil gnawing inside. By her side was Lucy Fielding, a calm, guiding presence who had seen more than her fair share of high-stakes legal showdowns. A brisk wind greeted them outside the courthouse. News vans and camera crews jostled for the best angles. Spotting Alicia, they rushed forward, microphones extended. Flashes of light assaulted her eyes and reporters shouted questions. She said nothing, only clutched Lucy's arm as they navigated through the press barricade. Even in her tension, Alicia caught glimpses of headlines scrawled on placards. Betrayed wife shows up to support or condemn millionaire husband. Inside, the hallways were lined with polished wood, the air thick with anticipation. Mark stood near the doors to the grand jury room, his attorney whispering in his ear. He looked drained, dark circles under his eyes, but he stood a little straighter upon seeing Alicia. Their gazes met for a flicker of a moment, and in that brief exchange, Alicia saw regret and lingering affection. She joined Lucy in the gallery, unsure of Veronica's whereabouts. But she didn't have to wait long. The clicking of high heels announced Veronica Rutherford's entrance. Dressed in a tailored grey business suit, she was every bit the image of a career woman. Yet there was a certain gleam in her eye, a triumphant smile curling her lips like a cat that had cornered its prey. The proceedings began. The district attorney, James Olson, led the questioning, focusing on Redwood's permits finances and alleged bribery. Mark's lawyer tried to present Carter Innovations as a victim of rogue employees who overstepped their bounds. Mark, for his part, answered carefully at times, looking pained or uncertain. The weight of the possible charges pressed into every syllable he spoke. Then came the twist. Veronica Rutherford took the stand, apparently subpoenaed by the DA, who believed she possessed relevant documents pertaining to Redwood's internal dealings. Everyone in the courtroom seemed stunned, Mark most of all. Alicia's heart raced. She watched as Veronica swore to tell the truth, then sat elegantly crossing her legs. The air hummed with tension. Her testimony began innocently enough, detailing her role in consulting for Carter Innovations. But soon, she started hinting that Mark and his top executives knowingly paid off city officials. When the DA asked for specifics, Veronica produced printed emails and memos. The evidence was damning, implicating Mark in green-lighting questionable payments to a shell company that funneled bribe money to government contacts. Lucy leaned over to Alicia, whispering, "This is bad for Mark. Very bad." Alicia felt tears threatening to well up, but she steeled herself. She refused to break down in front of Veronica. Then came a moment that made the entire gallery hold its breath. James Olson asked Ms. Rutherford, "Can you confirm whether Mr. Mark Carter personally instructed you to facilitate these payments?" Veronica flicked her gaze to Mark, letting the silence stretch. Then she smiled, that cold, confident smile. "Yes," she said, "I have an email directly from him. He told me to do whatever it takes to expedite Redwood approvals." A hush fell over the room. Mark's face went ashen, and his attorney leaped to object. The judge allowed the line of questioning to continue, instructing Veronica to provide clarity and produce the email. She handed a document to the bailiff, who gave it to the judge and the lawyers. The tension in the air crackled. If legitimate, it could bury Mark. Alicia watched, stunned. She had expected revelations, but not a direct, written confession. She felt the baby move again, as if sensing the turmoil around them. Could Mark truly have been so reckless? Or was Veronica fabricating evidence? Then, in an unexpected turn, Mark's attorney called for a short recess to examine the email. During the break, Alicia slipped outside, her breath hitching as the building's shadows loomed over her. She felt dizzy, worried she might faint. Lucy steadied her, urging her to sit on a bench. That was when Mark appeared, stepping out a side door. He approached Alicia quietly, ignoring the cameras swirling outside. He looked hollow, as though the testimony had drained him of life. Alicia glared at him, anger and sorrow welling inside. "You wrote those emails?" she demanded, her voice trembling. He glanced at Lucy, then lowered his head. I wrote a message telling the team to hurry Redwood along. But not to break the law, Alicia. Veronica must have doctored it. Lucy folded her arms. So you say, Mark. But do you have proof? He rubbed a hand over his face, despair etched in every line. I don't know. My legal team is scanning my email archives. We'll see if the metadata lines up with Veronica's printout. Alicia. His voice caught. I never wanted this. I never wanted to hurt you. She felt a fresh wave of tears threaten, but she bit them back. Do you understand what you've done? You betrayed me, our child, and possibly the law. Veronica's relishing every second of this. He nodded broken. I know. I was an idiot. I was weak. And now I might lose everything. Before Alicia could respond, a bailiff called them back into the courtroom. The hearing resumed, and Mark's legal team presented their findings. They claimed the metadata on Veronica's printout didn't match Mark's email server logs. In other words, the email was fake. A hush rippled through the gallery. The DA frowned, turning back to Veronica with fresh suspicion. Veronica, however, appeared unfazed. She insisted the email was real, that she had merely copied it to a different format. A forensic analysis was ordered. For the moment, the email's authenticity remained in question. But something else weighed on Alicia's mind, the Redwood payments. Even without the email, there was evidence suggesting Mark had knowledge of the bribery. With tensions at a boiling point, the judge adjourned the hearing, setting a new date to allow time for digital forensic analysis. All eyes turned to Mark, Alicia, and Veronica, who stood locked in a silent triangular standoff. As the crowd trickled out, Alicia turned to see Veronica across the aisle, regarding her with a smug grin. The mistress's laughter rang through Alicia's memory, echoing the cruel text messages, the mocking headlines. Veronica reveled in the chaos she had unleashed. But just then something unexpected occurred. Mark, stepping forward, cleared his throat. Your Honor, he called, halting the departing judge. I'd like to make a statement on the record before we adjourn. Alicia froze. She watched Mark gather himself, stepping up to the stand, ignoring the frantic signals from his own attorney to wait. The judge paused, eyebrows raised. Mr. Carter, this is highly irregular. I understand, Mark said, his voice trembling. But I need to say something that will set the record straight. He turned to the bailiff, prepared to be sworn in. The entire courtroom fell silent, a hush more profound than any that came before. Even Veronica, for the first time, looked uncertain, her confidence wavering. Alicia's heart hammered. She didn't know what Mark intended to reveal, but she sensed it was momentous. She braced herself, one hand on her belly, feeling the unborn child flutter with anticipation. In that charged moment, the world seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the words that could either condemn Mark or resurrect his honor and unravel the mistress's carefully woven illusions once and for all. All eyes were on Mark Carter as he raised his right hand to take an oath, swearing to tell the truth. The judge hesitated, but eventually allowed Mark to speak. Reporters in the gallery flipped open their notepads. Camera crews edged forward, and Veronica Rutherford straightened her posture carefully, masking her tension under a veneer of cool indifference. Mark's voice, though trembling at first, grew steadier with each sentence. I've made grave mistakes. First, I betrayed my wife, Alicia Carter, when she was pregnant with our child. He paused briefly, meeting Alicia's gaze. I regret that more than anything. I was weak, foolish, and let myself be seduced into a relationship that should never have happened. A ripple of whispers coursed through the spectators. Alicia blinked, tears forming at the edge of her eyes. She had never expected him to admit this so openly before a roomful of strangers. But Mark continued. I also turned a blind eye to some suspicious activities within Carter Innovations regarding the Redwood project. I wanted Redwood to succeed at any cost, but I never instructed anyone to break the law. Did I push my team to do whatever it takes? Yes. But I never meant illegal bribes. His hands clenched the edges of the witness stand. That's on me, though. I created the pressure that led to corners being cut. The judge nodded, taking notes. The DA stood, rigid arms folded, watching intently. Mark's gaze shifted to Veronica. But I also have to address Ms. Rutherford's allegations. She says I personally told her to bribe city officials. She claims I sent an email confirming it. I'm here under oath to say that email is fabricated, and I have reason to believe Veronica Rutherford is the one who orchestrated the bribes from the start. An explosion of gasps tore through the courtroom. Veronica's face flushed. She tightened her lips, struggling to maintain composure. Alicia's breath caught in her throat. Could this be true? Mark explained. While reviewing old records, I found a series of unauthorized expense accounts set up under Ms. Rutherford's control. Funds were funneled out to shell entities. Entities later identified in Redwood's approval process. He lifted a trembling hand. I was ignorant of these transactions because I gave Veronica too much freedom. We were involved, and I trusted her. It was my failure as a CEO and as a husband. Raising a stack of documents, Mark's attorney interjected. We've submitted copies of these records to the court. Preliminary forensic analysis suggests Ms. Rutherford made these transactions forging or manipulating Mr. Carter's digital signatures. We intend to provide additional evidence at the next hearing. The hush that followed was so absolute, one could hear the faint hum of the air conditioning. Veronica Rutherford's eyes flicked around the courtroom. For a split second, Alicia caught sight of panic in that haughty stare. Then Veronica stood abruptly, leaning toward her own attorney in a hushed exchange. Mark finished, his voice resolute. I'm no saint. My failures opened the door for corruption, but I did not bribe city officials, and I will not let my wife or my unborn child bear the burden of my sins or Ms. Rutherford's manipulations. The judge signaled for order in the courtroom, calling for an official recess. The flurry of voices swelled as soon as the gavel struck. Reporters shouted questions, camera flashes lit the room, and the bailiff struggled to maintain decorum. Standing on shaky legs, Alicia felt her head spin. Lucy Fielding guided her toward a nearby bench. Alicia's emotions warred within her shock. A flicker of hope, confusion, even pity for Mark's predicament. As she caught her breath, she realized that Mark's confession, as imperfect as it was, could change everything. Veronica, meanwhile, stormed out of the courtroom with her attorney. Microphones were thrust at her. The last Alicia saw before Lucy helped her out, another exit, was Veronica pushing past a throng of journalists refusing to comment. Her confidence had vanished, replaced by anger and desperation. Outside, in a private corridor, Mark approached Alicia cautiously, as though unsure if she would welcome his presence. She stood leaning against the wall, one hand on her pregnant belly. I'm sorry, he whispered, his voice raw. I know I said it before, but I needed to say it again publicly. She studied him, tears finally slipping down her cheeks. You should have never let it get this far. You should have thought about me and our baby before all of this. He nodded, tears shining in his own eyes. You're right. I have no excuse. Lucy stepped forward, glancing between them. Mark, this court revelation helps your legal position if the evidence holds up. But Alicia's well-being is my priority. Mark lifted a hand. I understand. I'm not asking for forgiveness yet. I just want Alicia to know. I'm done hiding. Whatever it costs me, I will do what I can to protect her and our child. Alicia wanted to lash out, to list every wound he had inflicted on her, every night of misery. But the sincerity in his eyes made her hesitate. She felt an odd mixture of relief and mourning. The man she had loved had re-emerged, but battered and flawed. And she was too tired to fight in that moment. Quietly, Alicia whispered, "Get through the next hearing, Mark. Prove the email is fake. Then we can decide what happens to us." He nodded, a grim determination settling in his features. "I will." Lucy and Alicia turned away, making their exit. As they stepped out into the fresh air, camera crews bombarded them again. But Lucy shielded Alicia, guiding her to a waiting car. The day had brought heartbreak revelations, and a sliver of truth that might topple Veronica Rutherford's arrogant laughter. Sinking into the plush car seat, Alicia felt her child shift again, as though letting her know they too sensed the weight of these events. She felt exhausted, anxious, but also strangely empowered. For the first time in months, Alicia sensed that she had a say in her own destiny, not just as the betrayed wife, but as a mother who would fight for the future she and her child deserved. In the days that followed, headlines erupted over Mark Carter's courtroom confession. Media outlets painted competing narratives. Some saw him as a scorned husband, throwing his mistress under the bus. Others deemed Veronica Rutherford a manipulative saboteur. But Alicia Carter cared little for the noise. She focused solely on protecting her child and preserving her peace. The courtroom reconvened quickly to determine the authenticity of the alleged bribery email. The findings were decisive metadata, confirmed the document had been doctored. Suspicion turned squarely toward Veronica. Her calculated game was unraveling. In a stunning reversal, the DA shifted the investigation's focus from Mark to Veronica. Though Mark's oversight failures remained serious, Veronica now faced the bulk of the criminal scrutiny. Carter Innovations agreed to a plea deal, hefty fines in exchange for avoiding criminal charges, while Mark stepped down from day-to-day operations. His empire survived, but at great cost. Alicia watched every moment from the gallery, her hand often resting on her stomach, her heart heavy but steady. She bore witness not as a bystander, but as a woman rising from betrayal with resolve. Mark, meanwhile, attempted to make amends not with grand gestures, but consistent humility. He apologized often, never pressuring Alicia, only offering space and support. Eventually, Veronica's downfall came in full. The court produced damning evidence of her financial manipulation and document forgery. A separate trial loomed for her on charges of embezzlement and bribery. When bailiffs escorted her from the courtroom, she threw Alicia a venomous look. But Alicia no longer flinched. The power Veronica once held over her had vanished. That night, Alicia lingered in the courtroom long after the noise had died. When Mark approached, he gently touched her shoulder. "It's over," he said quietly. She nodded. "But we still live with what it cost." He looked hopeful. "I want to be there for you, for our child, even if you don't take me back. I'll be here." Alicia didn't promise anything. "My focus is the baby. That hasn't changed." Weeks passed. Alicia returned to her grandmother's cottage, preparing for motherhood in solitude. Mark visited occasionally, never overstaying. He brought baby supplies and handwritten letters, but never expectations. Slowly, Alicia allowed space for cautious trust. One crisp morning her contractions began. Mark, by coincidence, visiting that day, rushed her to the hospital. After a long labor, Alicia gave birth to a healthy baby girl, Juliet Rose Carter. The name honored Alicia's French roots, and in that moment of new life, the shadows of scandal seemed to fade, if only for a breath. Later, Alicia let Mark hold their daughter. As he cradled her, tears welled in his eyes. Alicia watched, unsure if her heart could forgive, but certain that Juliet had already changed everything. Veronica, meanwhile, disappeared from public view. Her name was now associated not with glamour, but with scandal and fraud. Alicia no longer read the tabloids. She no longer needed their validation. Eventually, Mark asked if Alicia would return to the Carter estate only for a weekend. She agreed cautiously. When she arrived, she found the nursery completed exactly as she had designed it months ago. Soft pastels, gentle light. Everything untouched, waiting. Tears slipped down her cheeks. Mark whispered, "This is your home, if you want it." Alicia looked at Juliet, nestled in her arms. She didn't answer with words, but for the first time she didn't say no. Sometimes the deepest betrayals become the sharpest catalysts for change. In the aftermath of fiery accusations and damning truths, Mark Carter finally chose to speak the words that would alter his fate. For Alicia, those words arrived like a bittersweet balm acknowledgement of pain, a pledge of honesty, and a promise to cherish the innocent life they had created. In the end, no courthouse or scandal could break the powerful bond between a mother and her child, nor could the mistress's cruel laughter overshadow a wife's unwavering love. As you reflect on this tumultuous journey of secrets laid bare and hearts tested, may it remind you of the resilience that lies within us all. Secrets have a way of coming to light at the worst possible moment. Imagine a crowded baby shower filled with pink and blue balloons, tables overflowing with cupcakes, and a room full of guests snapping photos of a glowing mother-to-be. But then shouting erupts near the gift table. You see a furious husband confronting his very pregnant wife, who shouldn't even be there. In the blink of an eye, he pushes her backward, sending everyone into shocked silence. That's just the beginning. Little does he know when they all meet again in court, the next week, 2 new lives, and one devastating truth will redefine everything. Carter Dawson and Alicia Marshall met the way so many modern couples do at a networking event in downtown Los Angeles. Alicia worked in interior design, a field that allowed her to merge her creative impulses with a savvy business mind. Carter was fresh out of law school and raring to climb the legal ladder in his father's boutique law firm. They were both young, optimistic, and so certain that love would conquer all. When they first locked eyes over a tray of hors d'oeuvres, conversation flowed effortlessly. Alicia felt a spark of excitement that she hadn't felt in a long time. Carter, with his quick wit and confident posture, seemed to fill a void she didn't even know she had. The two began dating, and within 6 months, they were practically inseparable. For her, Carter was a man who took charge, but balanced it with enough charm to make it feel romantic. For him, Alicia was the kind of woman who lit up a room. She had a buoyant spirit and a fierce loyalty he found irresistible. It didn't take long for them to have the talk about marriage, children, and building a life together. Yet from the start, there were subtle warning signs. Carter was ambitious, so ambitious that at times he neglected Alicia's emotional needs in favor of professional goals. He'd stay late at the office, leaving her alone in their stylish downtown apartment. She would text him good night messages that often went unread until morning. He justified it by saying, "I'm working for our future," and Alicia, enamored and hopeful, believed him. They got married in a lavish ceremony, attended by Los Angeles's social elite. Friends flew in from all over the country. Even Lucy Walters, an old friend of Alicia's from her hometown in Ohio, made the trip to celebrate the union. Lucy was the kind of friend who kept Alicia grounded, always ready with a heart-warming reminder that love should never feel lonely, even in marriage. Lucy also noticed Carter's occasional aloofness, but she put it down to the stress of planning a wedding and adjusting to newlywed life. Still, Alicia would lie awake at night, listening to Carter's gentle snoring, wondering if they were moving too fast. But love won out, or at least it felt that way. When Alicia discovered she was pregnant, almost a year into their marriage, she took it as a sign that everything was falling into place. In truth, that very moment signaled the unraveling of her fairy tale. Carter's reaction to the pregnancy news was subdued. He smiled, gave her a hug, but Alicia sensed something missing. True excitement, perhaps. "This is great news," he had said, forcing a grin. "We'll start our family, and everything will be perfect." But as the months passed, Alicia was left to attend prenatal classes alone, while Carter claimed he had to work late. He would mutter things like, "I have court cases, Alicia. I can't just skip them." She reasoned that was the price of being married to an up-and-coming lawyer. Meanwhile, Lucy Walters called often, checking in from Ohio. Every time Lucy asked, "Is Carter there with you?" Alicia's pause on the phone spoke volumes. Little did Alicia know that her frequent loneliness wasn't just because Carter was working. He was also finding solace in someone else's arms, a charming young paralegal named Bianca Reed. Bianca Reed entered Carter's life just as Alicia's belly began to show. She was new at the firm, recommended by an old family friend of Carter's father. She had a bright smile, enviable curves, and a natural confidence in the office that made heads turn. She wasn't shy about her ambition to become a lawyer someday. But for now, she was content racking up experience and building her own network. The first time Bianca and Carter worked together, it was late, the office nearly empty, and Carter was reviewing a crucial piece of litigation. Bianca volunteered to stay and help organize the files. He noticed how meticulously she labeled them, how she seemed to anticipate exactly what he needed before he spoke. A simple conversation about a legal brief quickly spiraled into banter about travel hobbies and restaurant recommendations. It started innocently enough. Carter found himself laughing more in Bianca's presence than he had in months. She reminded him of who he had been before the pressures of married life, fatherhood-to-be, and unrelenting professional expectations weighed on him. Her laughter was contagious, and her flirtations were subtle but undeniable. Within a few weeks, Carter was staying late, even when he didn't have important work. He and Bianca would share takeout meals in the break room. They'd confide in each other about family histories, petty insecurities, and workplace dramas. When Alicia texted him, "Are you on your way home?" Carter often left the messages unanswered. He told himself it was harmless, just a little escapism. But deep down, he knew he was crossing lines. Bianca was aware of Carter's marriage, but she found herself drawn to his power, his poise, and the unspoken vulnerability he let slip when he thought no one was looking. She was younger, definitely more carefree, and her optimism about the future was something Carter craved. So their friendship leapt toward intimacy. Nights at the office turned into private dinners in discreet corners of the city, which turned into stolen weekends under the pretense of business trips. Friends at the law firm whispered about the suspicious closeness between Carter and Bianca. "He's a married man," said one junior associate. "He should be ashamed." But nobody dared confront the boss's son. Rumors, however, have a way of circling back, and eventually Alicia heard faint murmurs from Lucy, who heard it through a friend living in LA. Alicia confronted Carter several times, but each time he brushed it off. "Bianca's just a co-worker, Alicia. I'm busy. Don't let your hormones get the best of you." With every denial, Alicia's unease grew. She was pregnant, feeling emotionally fragile, and Carter was slipping further away, increasingly living in Bianca's orbit. Alicia tried her best to focus on her pregnancy doctor's appointments, vitamins, reading, parenting books. Yet she couldn't shake a looming dread that her marriage was in jeopardy. She was right. Alicia's growing suspicion fueled her determination to find proof. One afternoon, while Carter was in the shower, she took a deep breath and opened his phone. They had always respected each other's privacy. Alicia believed trust was paramount in any marriage, but desperation drove her to break this rule. His passcode was his birthday, a sign of how complacent he'd become about hiding secrets. She scrolled through his messages and found exactly what she feared. Text after text between Carter and Bianca told the story of an affair with unguarded explicitness. "I can't stop thinking about last night," Bianca wrote. "I love the way you smell," Carter replied. Alicia's hands trembled as she read messages, scheduling romantic dinners and booking hotel rooms. Her heart pounded so violently that she worried she might faint. She felt her unborn baby move inside her, an unsettling reminder of the life she carried, a child whose father was already entangled with another woman. When Carter emerged from the shower, Alicia confronted him. Tears were streaming down her face. Her voice quivered as she hurled the evidence in his face. For a moment, he was struck dumb. Then came the excuses, Alicia. "It's not what you think. It just happened. I was lonely. I'm under a lot of stress." At that moment, Alicia couldn't handle his excuses. She felt a physical ache in her chest, and the baby kicked again, as if to demand better from a father who was clearly betraying them both. She stormed out of the bathroom, slammed the door, and spent the night in the guest bedroom crying until her eyes felt raw. The following morning, Alicia woke up to Carter's frantic knocking on the guest room door. She braced herself for the usual sweet talk or hollow apology. But what she got was more of the same half-hearted remorse, pledges to change empty words about how he'd never do it again. Alicia wanted to believe him. She still loved him. But the damage was done. Something broke in her that night, and she wasn't sure how to piece it back together. Lucy, always the loyal friend, flew to LA the next week to offer Alicia emotional support. Over cups of herbal tea, Lucy pressed Alicia about her options. "Are you leaving him? Are you staying? You need to think of your baby. You can't keep living like this." Alicia bit her lip, tears threatening again. "I don't know," she finally whispered. "I'm scared to raise this baby alone, but he's driving me insane." Days turned into weeks. Carter promised counseling, offered to cut ties with Bianca. He acted repentant, but Alicia discovered more texts showing that nothing had changed. Each betrayal hollowed Alicia out. She told Carter to leave, but he refused, insisting that he could fix this. The emotional roller coaster was exhausting, and Alicia felt her own health suffering. Yet the final straw hadn't arrived until Alicia found out about the baby shower. One morning, Alicia received a call from an unrecognized number. When she picked up the voice on the line, was that of Bianca's sister, Carmen Reed, who had always looked out for her younger sibling, sometimes with a misguided sense of loyalty. Carmen sounded hesitant, almost guilty. "Alicia." "I'm sorry to bother you," she said awkwardly, "but I think you should know something. Bianca is pregnant." Pregnant. The word echoed in Alicia's mind like a cannon shot. The full implications rattled her. Carter's mistress pregnant. She clutched her stomach protectively, her own baby nearly 6 months along. "I'm calling because Bianca wants Carter to attend her baby shower," Carmen continued. "She's mailed invitations to family and close friends and, well, I don't think you'd appreciate it, but she asked me to confirm. She said Carter promised to come." Alicia's emotions spun out of control. At first she fell silent, tears burning her eyes. Then she began to chuckle, a bitter, humorless sound. The situation was so absurd, it almost felt like a twisted joke. Carter fathering 2 babies at once, one in his marriage, one in an affair. Carmen cleared her throat. "Look, Alicia, I'm not trying to hurt you, but I think you should know what's going on. I don't approve of what Bianca has done. But she's my sister, and I'm in a tough spot." Alicia exhaled, tried to calm her shaking hands. "Thank you for calling," she managed, then ended the conversation. As she stared at her phone, Alicia's anger crystallized into determination. She wasn't going to let Carter slink out of the house with some lie about a business meeting. If he was going to brazenly attend his mistress's baby shower, he would have to face her. And she decided then and there that she would attend 2 uninvited. Bianca's baby shower was held at a charming countryside venue in the hills above Los Angeles, an elegant rustic barn with sweeping views of vineyards and rolling fields. The decorations were a tasteful blend of soft pastel balloons with lavish floral arrangements and vintage furniture. Through the giant barn doors, you could see tables laden with gourmet pastries and meticulously wrapped gifts. It was the kind of affair that Instagram influencers would pay good money to feature. Alicia arrived wearing a loose-fitting but elegant dress that draped over her pregnant belly. She had told no one she was coming, not even Lucy. She needed to do this alone to see with her own eyes just how far the betrayal extended. Her heart raced as she made her way up the gravel path. She spotted Carter's car in the makeshift parking lot, her nerves twisting into knots. She swallowed hard, praying that her resolve wouldn't shatter. Music played inside a soft, cheery tune that might have felt comforting under other circumstances. The guests were mostly Bianca's family and friends, plus a few co-workers from the law firm. Alicia recognized a few familiar faces associates who worked under Carter, smirking at her presence. A few gasped, but nobody dared to stop her. Then she saw Carter and Bianca near the front, laughing about something as they greeted a guest. Bianca looked radiant in a flowing, peach-colored dress that showcased her belly. Carter's hand rested on the small of Bianca's back the same way he used to touch Alicia when they were dating. Alicia felt a visceral sting, as though her heart was being crushed in a vice. Initially, Carter didn't notice Alicia. He was preoccupied with introducing Bianca to a senior partner from the firm. But once he turned around, their eyes locked. For a split second, horror flickered across Carter's face. He rushed toward Alicia, trying to usher her out before she made a scene. "What are you doing here?" he hissed under his breath, his voice tinged with panic. "Please, you shouldn't be here." Before Alicia could respond, Bianca sauntered over, curiosity morphing into alarm as she realized who had shown up. "You have a lot of nerve," she said to Alicia, though she tried to maintain a veneer of grace in front of her guests. Then, in a softer voice, dripping with condescension, "Maybe we can talk. Outside." Alicia felt a lifetime of anger and betrayal welling inside her. She glanced around and saw the crowd gawking. She spoke in a steady voice that shocked even herself. "Why don't we talk right here? After all, you invited the father of my child. I assume you don't mind having me around, too." A hush settled over the guests. Some of Bianca's relatives shot each other worried glances. Carmen Reed stood in a corner, pale with guilt. The tension was electric. Carter tried again to corral Alicia by the arm, but she pulled away. "Don't touch me," she snarled. "I came to see exactly what I've suspected all along. You've been lying to me for months. Carter, and here you are, celebrating a baby you're having with another woman." Bianca, for her part, looked mortified. She tried to salvage the event by signaling the DJ to raise the music, but it was too late. The hush among the guests had turned into a collective recoil nobody wanted to step in. It was a train wreck in slow motion. Finally, Carter's temper snapped. "You're making a scene," he shouted, voice echoing across the barn. He reached for Alicia's arm again, more forcefully this time, as if to drag her outside and end this spectacle. Alicia's body tensed, and she tried to free herself. "Let go of me." Then, in a moment that would replay in Alicia's nightmares for weeks to come, Carter shoved her. Not just a nudge, he pushed her away with enough force that she stumbled backward, nearly colliding with a table of pastel-frosted cupcakes. A collective gasp tore through the onlookers. Some guests rushed forward to help Alicia regain her balance, but the damage was done. She felt the sharp pain in her back from the abrupt movement. Tears of shock and fury welled in her eyes. She'd never thought Carter would harm her physically, especially not while she was pregnant. Carter's eyes widened, as though realizing the weight of what he had done. Alicia steadied herself, both hands protectively on her belly, fighting back tears. I didn't mean," Carter stammered, but the words died in his throat. Bianca stood frozen, unsure whether to comfort Alicia or side with Carter. The crowd erupted in hushed conversations and speculation. Carmen Reed finally rushed to Alicia's side, but Alicia waved her away. She felt humiliated, furious, and heartbreakingly alone. "Stay away from me," Alicia managed, her voice trembling. Then she turned and stormed out of the barn, leaving stunned guests and a wave of uneasy murmurs behind her. She didn't look back. She couldn't bear to face the man who had just shattered her last shred of trust. Word of the scandal at the baby shower spread quickly. A few of Bianca's friends, outraged by what they witnessed, posted cryptic messages on social media. Some men have zero shame. Pregnancy. Drama. Unbelievable. Within hours, Lucy Walters in Ohio found out what happened and called Alicia in tears, begging her to press charges or at least file a restraining order. Alicia refused to answer calls from everyone, at first overwhelmed by the magnitude of the betrayal. But eventually, Alicia confided in Lucy, describing the humiliating moment when Carter shoved her. "I'm fine, physically," she said, her voice cracking. "The baby's fine. I went to the doctor just to be sure." Lucy breathed a sigh of relief, but remained livid at Carter's behavior. "You deserve better," Lucy kept repeating. "He's not the man you married." Meanwhile, Carter tried to do damage control. He texted Alicia incessantly. "Alicia, I'm so sorry. Please let me explain. I lost my temper. You know I'd never hurt you or the baby. Please don't leave me, we can work this out." Alicia refused to respond. She felt numb, empty, and unable to process that the man she once adored could harm her. She spent her days curled up on the sofa replaying the moment in her mind. She scheduled sessions with a therapist to untangle her conflicting emotions: anger, sadness, fear. Carter's parents got wind of the altercation too. His mother, Gloria Dawson, was horrified. She reached out to Alicia, begging her not to involve the police and promising that Carter's father would ensure Alicia was taken care of financially. It was a classic damage control move, and Alicia felt insulted by the implicit bribe. She wanted accountability, not hush money. Then, as if the situation weren't complicated enough, Alicia received a phone call from an unexpected source. Bianca. Her voice was trembling and apologetic. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. I never expected Carter to react that way," Bianca said. "This is my baby shower, and it turned into a nightmare. I didn't want to hurt you like that." Alicia listened in stunned silence. Could Bianca actually be apologizing? Or was she simply trying to play innocent? Bianca continued, "I'm not some monster, Alicia. Carter told me your marriage was essentially over, that you were just roommates. I believed him. I'm not justifying my actions, but I need you to know I wasn't trying to ruin your life. I'm pregnant too, and I want what's best for my child." Alicia felt fury surging in her again, but she forced herself to remain calm. "If you cared about what's best for your child," she said quietly, "you would have realized that fathering 2 babies at once is not exactly stable. And if you believed Carter when he said our marriage was over, you were naive. Or maybe you just didn't care." Bianca let out a shaky breath. "I can't change what happened, but I want you to know I'm leaving Los Angeles. I'm moving back with my family in San Diego. This scandal is too big for me to handle here. I don't want my baby to be born into this mess." Surprisingly, Alicia felt a faint sense of relief. At least Bianca was removing herself from Carter's direct orbit. But the damage was done, and Alicia had to figure out her own life. "I appreciate the apology," she said flatly, ending the call. She doubted she'd ever speak to Bianca again. Just as Alicia was gearing up to distance herself from Carter. Permanently, she received an unexpected notice in the mail, a summons for a family court hearing. Confused, she immediately called Lucy, who listened in disbelief. The summons stated that Carter was petitioning for a hearing to discuss custody and visitation rights of both unborn children. "It's insane," Alicia fumed, pacing her living room. "He physically harmed me, and now he has the nerve to demand a hearing about custody before the baby is even born." Lucy was livid on Alicia's behalf. "He's probably doing preemptive damage control. He knows you might file domestic violence charges or limit his access to the baby once it's born. He's trying to paint you as the emotional one so he can hold on to some parental rights." That night, Alicia wrestled with insomnia. She felt torn. On one hand, she didn't want to deprive her child of a father if Carter could somehow redeem himself. On the other, she wanted to protect her baby from a man who had physically harmed her while pregnant. Ironically, Carter's father, Harold Dawson, was a prominent lawyer in family law. He reached out, offering to mediate, but Alicia refused. She suspected the hearing was a tactic orchestrated by the Dawson family to keep everything under their control. Feeling cornered, Alicia hired her own attorney, a reputable woman named Teresa Grant, who had built a career advocating for domestic abuse survivors. Teresa was enraged when she heard Alicia's story. "We can countersue for a protective order," she said. "We can also document everything that happened at the baby shower." Alicia was hesitant. "I don't want an ugly court battle," she said softly. hand on her belly. "I just want to live in peace." Teresa placed a gentle hand on Alicia's shoulder. "Sometimes the only way to get peace is to fight for it." So Alicia steeled herself for the legal confrontation looming. The hearing was set for the following week, a date that made Alicia's heart pound every time she thought about it. She knew she'd have to see Carter in court, face the paternal claims he was making, and relive the trauma of the baby shower scene. She wasn't sure she had the emotional stamina, but Lucy encouraged her. "You can do this," Lucy said. "You have to do this for you and your baby." What Alicia didn't know was that fate was about to add an even bigger twist to the drama, two tiny new arrivals who would upend the entire narrative in a way no one could have predicted. In the days leading up to the court hearing, Alicia tried to keep her stress levels down for the baby's sake. She practiced mindfulness exercises, took gentle walks, and tried to eat nutrient-rich foods. The tension, however, was inescapable. Meanwhile, Lucy, who was still in Ohio, called almost daily. Each time she pressed Alicia to stay strong. "Don't forget," Lucy reminded her, "Carter will try to manipulate the situation. Show the judge you're prepared. Focus on the facts, his affair, his violence, your willingness to co-parent, if he respects boundaries." The morning of the hearing arrived. Alicia dressed in a simple black maternity dress and sat in Teresa Grant's office, reviewing last-minute details. Her nerves felt like they were on fire. When they arrived at the courthouse, Alicia's stomach churned upon seeing Carter's sleek sedan parked outside. She took a deep breath and walked inside, refusing to be intimidated. After a brief wait, both parties were called into a modest courtroom with pew-like benches and fluorescent lights. The judge, a stern woman named Judge Regina Martin, observed them with a practiced neutrality. Carter sat at one table with his father, Harold Dawson, as legal counsel. Alicia and Teresa took seats at the opposite table. Harold Dawson began with a spiel about how Carter was deeply concerned about the well-being of his unborn child, claiming Alicia had become emotionally volatile and uncooperative. Alicia's mouth tightened, a new wave of anger stirring in her chest. She watched Carter remain silent, wearing a suit that tried to evoke respectability. Teresa countered by detailing the baby shower incident. She spoke of Alicia's documented hospital visit afterward. Thankfully, Alicia and the baby were unhurt. Teresa also submitted witness statements from a few guests who had seen Carter shove Alicia. Judge Martin's face was impassive, but Alicia sensed the judge's disapproval at hearing about violence against a pregnant woman. She asked direct questions of Carter. "Is it true you engaged in a physical altercation with your wife at another woman's baby shower?" Carter squirmed his carefully rehearsed lines, struggling to come out smoothly. "I wouldn't call it an altercation. Your Honor, I was trying to de-escalate a situation and things got out of hand." Judge Martin pressed further, unimpressed. "De-escalate by pushing your pregnant wife." Carter lowered his gaze. "It was a mistake. I lost my temper. I am deeply remorseful." Just then the courtroom doors swung open. A bailiff tried to stop the commotion, but an older woman rushed in, shouting, "Your Honor, you need to see this." She was holding a car seat. Beside her stood Bianca Reed, pale and anxious, carrying a car seat of her own. Inside each car seat was a newborn, two tiny infants, both fussing softly. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Judge Martin demanded order. "Who are you, ma'am? And why are you interrupting this hearing?" The older woman introduced herself as Angela Reed, Bianca's mother. "These are Bianca's babies, Your Honor. Twin boys, born prematurely last night. And Carter Dawson is listed as the father." She glared at Carter. "We came to find him because he needs to see the consequences of his actions. Alicia felt her stomach drop as she watched Carter's face go pale. He gawked at the infants, clearly not expecting them to be born yet. He stumbled out of his seat, eyes locked on the newborns. The entire courtroom broke into hushed murmurs. Bianca stood there, tears in her eyes, still obviously exhausted from giving birth. "They're premature," she said, addressing the judge. "They need medical support. But my mother insisted on coming here to show Carter." Judge Martin banged her gavel, calling for silence. "Let me get this straight. You are Ms. Bianca Reed, and you have twin boys you claim are fathered by Mr. Dawson, who is simultaneously in court to address custody issues regarding his wife's unborn child." Bianca nodded, eyes downcast. Alicia simply stared, stunned beyond words. She felt like she was trapped in a surreal reality show. Harold Dawson scrambled to do damage control. He stood, smoothing his suit jacket. "Your Honor, we were unaware the children had been born. We believe a paternity test is necessary to Angela Reed cut him off. There's no need for a test." Carter signed an acknowledgement of paternity form when Bianca was admitted. "The hospital has it on record." Carter looked blindsided. He finally found his voice. "They gave me a bunch of papers while Bianca was in labor." "I didn't know," Judge Martin banged her gavel again, the crack echoing. "Enough, Ms. Reed, Ms. Marshall. Both of you are here due to Mr. Dawson. We need to proceed with order." The next hour in the courtroom was a whirlwind. Judge Martin decided that since all parties were present, they would address both the custody petition Carter filed for Alicia's unborn child and this new situation involving Bianca's newborn twins. Bianca, still looking as though she should be in a hospital bed, explained through tears that the twins were born at just 34 weeks. "They're stable, but they need careful monitoring," she said. "I wasn't trying to ambush Carter. My mother insisted we come." Angela Reed nodded vigorously, glaring at Carter and Harold Dawson. Carter's father tried to steer the conversation toward a reasonable arrangement, but every time he spoke, Judge Martin's frown deepened. "Your client and son has fathered 2 sets of children simultaneously, and there's a documented incident of physical violence against a pregnant partner. There is nothing reasonable about this situation, Mr. Dawson." Teresa Grant took her turn, explaining Alicia's position. "My client has no desire to restrict a loving father from being in her child's life. However, given Mr. Dawson's violence and infidelity, we request a protective order and supervised visitation for him, pending a thorough review by Child Protective Services. We also want to ensure Ms. Marshall's medical care is covered and that child support is arranged properly." Judge Martin listened intently, asking pointed questions. Carter tried to defend himself by claiming the push was an accident. He also expressed concern for Bianca and the twins, insisting he would do right by them, though his voice trembled under the judge's scrutiny. Angela Reed stepped up, seething with righteous fury. She described how Carter had made promises to Bianca, swearing he would leave Alicia after the baby was born. Carter's head dropped as Angela's words hung in the sterile air. Alicia, meanwhile, felt an acute sorrow. So he had planned to leave her all along once his mistress had a baby. When it was Bianca's turn to speak, she offered a sobering perspective. "I know what we did was wrong," she said in a trembling voice. "I'm not here to defend our affair. But these twins are innocent. They need a father who won't abandon them at the first sign of difficulty. The stress of everything probably contributed to my premature labor." The entire time, Alicia tried to maintain her composure. She felt a surge of empathy for Bianca's babies. They had no choice in this chaos. She also felt heartbreak for her own unborn child, caught in the middle of a fractured family. All eyes turned to Alicia as Judge Martin inquired about her stance. In a clear, steady voice, Alicia said, "I'm here today for the well-being of my child. I won't deny Carter's paternity if he truly wants to be a father, but I can't expose myself or my baby to violence. I'm requesting the court's protection." A few rows behind them, the gallery was packed. Teresa had brought witnesses from the baby shower to corroborate the assault on Alicia. Their testimonies left no doubt that Carter had indeed pushed her, whether intentionally or not. The last person to speak was Lucy Walters, who had flown in that morning. She delivered a heartfelt statement about Alicia's character, describing her as a loyal, kind person who deserved better than the betrayal she'd received. By the end of the hearing, Carter slumped in his seat, his world spiraling out of control. Bianca stood with tears in her eyes, cradling her premature infant. Another baby squirmed in Angela Reed's arms. Alicia remained stoic, her attorney's hand on her shoulder. Judge Martin cleared her throat, scanning the faces before her. "This is one of the more complicated family law matters I've encountered. Mr. Dawson, your actions have put 2 women and 3 children in jeopardy. First and foremost, the physical safety of Miss Marshall and her unborn child must be assured." She turned to address Alicia directly. "Miss Marshall, I'm granting you an emergency protective order. Mr. Dawson is to maintain 0 physical contact with you until further review, and any communication regarding your child must go through your attorney." "Do you understand?" Alicia nodded, relief and sorrow mingling in her chest. "Yes, Your Honor." Turning to Carter, the judge continued, "You will undergo anger management counseling, and any visitation with your child once born shall be supervised. Regarding the twin infants Ms. Reed has presented to this court, I want a paternity confirmation, although I acknowledge Mr. Dawson signed an acknowledgement at the hospital. If confirmed, custody and visitation arrangements will similarly require supervision until I am satisfied you are not a danger. Additionally, child support will be determined once paternity is established." Bianca wiped her eyes, nodding weakly. She looked exhausted, but there was relief that at least her baby's care was being considered. Angela Reed shot Carter a final scathing look, as if to say, "We wouldn't be here if not for you." Harold Dawson tried to protest the terms, but Judge Martin cut him off sternly. "Your client is fortunate he wasn't taken into custody for assault on a pregnant woman. The evidence is overwhelming. If you want to fight these rulings, we can schedule a further hearing, but as of now, this is the court's decision." A hushed silence settled on the room as Judge Martin concluded, "We will reconvene in 6 weeks for a follow-up hearing to assess compliance with these orders. Court is adjourned." She banged her gavel, and the tension in the room finally broke. Carter's father began whispering to him, but Carter looked too stunned to respond. Alicia exhaled slowly, feeling an unfamiliar blend of triumph and sadness. There were no real winners here. Just a man who had destroyed the trust of 2 women, fathered 3 children almost simultaneously, and ended up with the scrutiny of the law on him. But Alicia had stood up for herself, and she was determined to continue doing so. Bianca approached Alicia hesitantly, newborn in hand. She whispered, "I'm sorry again. I don't expect your forgiveness, but I do hope we can avoid more drama for the sake of the kids." Alicia looked at the infant who was so small his tiny fist looked no bigger than a plum. She felt a pang in her chest, a maternal empathy for another mother in crisis. But she also remembered the betrayal, the lies. "I hope you and your babies stay safe," she said quietly, then walked away. Lucy followed, placing a comforting arm around Alicia's shoulders. Outside the courthouse, the sun felt too bright, the air too harsh. But for the first time in a long while, Alicia felt a small measure of hope. She had survived the baby shower assault, confronted Carter in court, and discovered the shocking truth of the twins. Now she had a legal framework to protect herself and her child. In the weeks that followed, Alicia settled into a new normal. She moved out of the downtown apartment she'd shared with Carter, finding a small but cozy place near Lucy's cousin, who lived in LA. She'd changed her phone number to avoid Carter's harassing calls. Financially, she relied on her interior design work and a small emergency fund she'd saved. The protective order allowed her some peace of mind, though she remained vigilant. Carter, meanwhile, started mandatory anger management classes. He tried to contact Alicia through mutual friends, but Teresa Grant shut that down swiftly. The court had made it clear that all communication had to go through legal channels. Bianca's twins were placed in neonatal care for a few extra days before being released. She moved back to San Diego with her mother, away from the rumor mill in Los Angeles. Carter arranged to visit the twins under supervision at a neutral facility, though it was more for show than genuine paternal devotion. The entire spectacle took a toll on his professional life. The law firm, under public scrutiny, put him on indefinite leave. Co-workers whispered about the day he pushed his pregnant wife at his mistress's baby shower. Some voiced sympathy for Alicia, others quietly criticized Bianca. But Carter bore the brunt of the shame. Lucy stayed in LA for another week, helping Alicia get organized. One evening they sat in Alicia's new living room, sipping tea. Lucy asked gently, "How are you feeling about everything?" Alicia rubbed her swollen belly, feeling her baby's gentle kicks. Sad, angry, sometimes relieved. It's a mix of emotions every day. But I'm trying to focus on the baby's future, on creating a safe, loving environment. Lucy nodded. "You'll be an amazing mother." "Don't forget that." Alicia managed a small smile. "Thank you." The baby was due in a few months, and Alicia contemplated whether she wanted Carter in the delivery room. For now, she was content with the protective order. She could revisit that decision closer to her due date. Slowly, Alicia felt herself healing. She leaned on therapy sessions, found solace in supportive friends, and started accepting that her dream of a happy family with Carter was gone. She began to envision a life where she was a single mother, raising a child in a stable home, free from constant betrayal and conflict. It wasn't the life she had planned, but it was one she could embrace with courage. 2 months later, Alicia had just returned from a prenatal checkup when she found Carter sitting in the lobby of her new building. Her heart lurched at the sight of him. He looked worn, dark circles under his eyes, hair unkempt. She instinctively placed a hand over her belly. She also recalled the protective order, which explicitly forbade him from coming near her residence. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, stepping back. A pang of fear flared in her chest. "You're violating the order." Carter rose slowly, his hands raised in a gesture of surrender. "I know. I'm sorry," he said, voice strained. "I just needed to see you, to apologize, to talk. I've been in therapy. I'm getting help for my anger." Alicia's pulse quickened. She glanced around, hoping a neighbor or building security might step in if this went badly. "You should have gone through Teresa. This isn't okay." He nodded, eyes downcast. "I know. I messed up. I'm leaving LA. I wanted to tell you in person. His gaze flicked to her belly. I also wanted to see if you needed anything before I go. Money, baby supplies, anything. Alicia swallowed hard. She noticed a glint of sincerity in his eyes, different from before. You haven't changed that fast, Carter. But if you're truly remorseful, you'd respect the court orders. You'd do the right thing financially and legally. He fiddled with the handle of his briefcase. I'm going to stay with a cousin in San Francisco, do my therapy there, and figure out how to be a better father. I'm not asking for us to get back together. I just wanted you to know I'm sorry. Alicia felt tears prick her eyes. She believed he was in genuine pain, but she also remembered that remorse often comes too late. If you want to be a good father, stay away until you're ready to be safe around me and the baby. She paused, her voice trembling. And talk to my lawyer about child support. Carter lowered his head, nodded. I will. Take care of yourself, Alicia. He walked out, shoulders slumped. Alicia felt a rush of mixed emotions. Relief, sadness, hope. She wasn't sure if Carter was truly on a path to redemption, or if this was another performance. Either way, she was resolute that her priority was her child's well-being. Weeks turned into months. Alicia inched closer to her due date, investing her energy into preparing a nursery. Her friend Lucy visited again, helping set up a crib and stock up on diapers. They hung soft yellow curtains by the window, letting in a warm glow. Each baby blanket folded neatly in the dresser reminded Alicia that despite the chaos, there was a precious new life coming soon. Meanwhile, Alicia's attorney confirmed that Carter had begun making monthly payments into an escrow account for child support. He occasionally sent updates on his therapy sessions through Harold Dawson, but Alicia tried to avoid emotional entanglements. She kept her boundaries firm. Bianca occasionally texted Alicia short updates about the twins' health. The babies were growing stronger, hitting milestones, and Alicia found herself somewhat relieved to know they were okay. There was no longer hostility in Bianca's messages, just two women who'd been hurt by the same man, forging a fragile sense of civility. One morning, Alicia woke up with contractions. She called Lucy, who arrived 20 minutes later, loaded Alicia into her car, and sped to the hospital. Despite the rush, Alicia felt an undercurrent of calm. She'd been waiting for this moment, a new life, a new direction, free from the shadows of betrayal. 12 hours later, Alicia gave birth to a healthy baby girl named Clara Rose Marshall. Holding Clara in her arms, Alicia wept tears of pure joy. A wave of protective love surged through her, overshadowing every heartbreak she'd endured. Lucy cut the umbilical cord, tears of pride shining in her eyes. Teresa visited the next day, bringing flowers and a stuffed bunny. She's perfect, Teresa cooed, admiring the sleeping infant. Alicia smiled, gazing at her daughter with wonder. Perfect, she whispered. The months after Clara's birth unfolded like a quiet dawn after a long, stormy night. Alicia nestled into the rhythm of single motherhood, finding solace in the small but extraordinary moments that filled her days. Sleepless nights were softened by Clara's warm breath against her skin, and the gentle curve of her daughter's first smile lit a flame in Alicia's soul that could never be extinguished. She paused her larger interior design contracts and focused on small freelance gigs that allowed her to work from home. With Lucy's help, before she returned to Ohio, Alicia had turned her small apartment into a haven, soft pastel tones, cushioned corners, and the faint scent of lavender lingering in the air. It wasn't the life she had once imagined, but it was a life she now embraced fully. Carter remained in San Francisco, honoring the boundaries outlined in the court's orders. He sent occasional letters, some apologetic, others reflective. Alicia read them sometimes aloud during therapy sessions, but rarely responded. The emotions they stirred were complicated. He had shattered her world, but he was still Clara's father. And Alicia had no intention of hiding that from her daughter, only shielding her from harm. After consulting with Teresa and her therapist, Alicia agreed that when Clara was older, and if Carter had shown consistency in his therapy and personal growth, a supervised visit could be considered. But Alicia made one thing clear: my daughter's safety and well-being come before anything else. Bianca, now living quietly in San Diego with her mother, and the twins resumed her paralegal studies online. She messaged Alicia a few times, brief updates, soft-toned and full of regret. The anger between them had ebbed, replaced by a cautious truce. They both bore the scars of Carter's betrayal, but they also shared a reluctant bond as mothers navigating new fractured realities. The twins were reported to be thriving, chubby, healthy and alert. Alicia sent a congratulatory message when they turned 6 months. Bianca replied with a photo, 2 gummy smiles staring back at the camera. Alicia stared at it for a long time, her emotions a blend of sadness, closure, and strange peace. Lucy had eventually returned to Ohio, but the daily calls never stopped. She became Alicia's lifeline from afar, sending silly memes, voice messages filled with encouragement and care packages of herbal teas and onesies. "You're doing incredible," Lucy often said. "You've done more than survive. You've grown." One evening, Alicia stood by the window. Clara nestled against her chest. The city outside pulsed with life, but inside there was stillness, peace. She watched the last traces of a golden sunset slip beneath the rooftops, her thoughts drifting back to the day she had walked into Bianca's baby shower. The humiliation, the anger, the violence, it had once defined her story, but not anymore. Now it was Clara's tiny hands that guided her forward. Every giggle, every midnight feeding, every milestone was a reminder of how far Alicia had come. She no longer felt broken. She felt rebuilt, stitched back together with resilience, clarity, and love. Occasionally she would glance at the unopened letters Carter continued to send, stored in a shoebox beneath her bed. Maybe one day Clara would read them. Maybe one day there would be understanding. But not yet. As the weeks rolled into seasons, Alicia found joy in the unexpected, a new client who appreciated her minimalist touch. A book club formed by local mums. Clara's first word. Mama spoken with such unfiltered joy, it brought Alicia to her knees in tears. Her heart healed in slow, steady beats, soothed by every little proof that life could bloom from brokenness. On Clara's first birthday, Alicia hosted a small gathering in a sunlit park. Balloons, swaying gently in the breeze. Cupcakes in pastel shades after of new friends who had become family. Lucy flew in. Bianca sent a quiet birthday message. Carter did not attend. He wasn't ready, and Alicia didn't feel guilty about that anymore. She had learned something invaluable. Closure doesn't always come in the form of reconciliation. Sometimes it's choosing yourself, choosing peace, choosing to look ahead instead of behind. As Alicia laid Clara down that night, the baby's tiny fingers clutched her mother's shirt. Alicia kissed her forehead, whispering a vow only they would ever hear. You'll never have to wonder if you're loved. The scars of betrayal remained, yes, but they were no longer open wounds. They were part of the landscape of a life rebuilt with strength. And in the heart of that landscape, Alicia had carved out a new beginning. One full of promise and anchored by the most important truth she had ever known. She was enough. And Clara, her beautiful daughter, would grow up in a home filled not with drama or pain, but with unwavering, unconditional love. Sometimes life's harshest twists become the stepping stones to newfound strength. Alicia's journey reminds us that even the most devastating betrayal cannot extinguish the power of hope. She faced the humiliation of discovering her husband's double life, survived the horrifying moment he pushed her during a baby shower, and courageously stood up in court when her world was crumbling. Yet through it all, she held fast to her dreams of becoming a loving parent, and she turned those dreams into a reality. Clara was born into adversity, but surrounded by a mother's unwavering devotion. The court battled the broken trust, the complicated webs of relationships, all gave Alicia the clarity she needed to rebuild. And rebuild she did. If you found Alicia's journey inspiring, please like this video, share it with anyone who needs to hear a message of resilience, and subscribe for more powerful stories that prove hope can triumph over heartbreak.